Our next session is entitled Disaster Ready Data Protection. And you know what? I used to work at a data center, and that's something I was always worried about. So let's go ahead without any waiting at all. Let's bring up Alex Quilter, Senior Director of Product Management at Solarwinds. Alex, come on up.
Hey everybody, this is when Jeff first started out the day, he asked everybody who this is their first CloudFest. I was one of those hands, so thank you for letting me come out here today. Also, that would make it my first time in Germany, if you do the math, which Germany is pretty cool. I'm very happy to be here. I work out of North Carolina in our RTP office for SolarWinds. A couple other firsts. This is also my first time representing SolarWinds here in a presentation. So a lot of firsts for me, but I have been doing this a little bit of time. So I'm primarily from the information security background. I've done a lot of enterprise software security products, vulnerability assessment, secure configuration management, file integrity monitoring, network device discovery. These were all the things that I grew up in my career kind of working on. And I stepped in to take on SolarWinds' backup portfolio of products. It's a very interesting change. I think, how many of you remember when information security was what we called the security industry? Right, not a lot. Then it became computer security. Who remembers computer security? Okay, we got network security. This was like the age of the firewall. Anyone from the network security generation? Okay, cyber security. This is everybody, right? Everybody knows cyber security now. Well, I'm going to take you back to the roots of that. In information security, you remember there were tenets, the 3 tenets of information security. What were they? Had like the cool CIA acronym, so we all got to think we were spies. Do you guys remember this? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Those are the 3. I spent most of my career on the C and a little bit of the I, and backup's actually the first time where I get to really go back and think about working on availability. Backup is about keeping your data available, protecting your data so you have it when you need it, not necessarily always trying to fight off people who are trying to get it. There's an element of that, but we'll get into that. So data protection. Yeah, I said I do backup and recovery, but I've noticed across the board, almost everybody in this space right now, they're not talking about backup that much anymore. They're not talking about recovery anymore. They're really talking about data protection, right? That's what people are worried about. And I said, oh, I know that. Data protection's pretty easy, right? This is all the stuff I used to do in information security. PCI compliance, protecting the PII, the credit card, the CDE data, making sure it can't leak out, data leak protection, prevention, all of the different ways we're looking at data. But that's not really what I learned. So I've been involved here at SolarWinds for about 6 months. I'm a product manager, so if those of you know what product management is, it's a very interesting role, but for me it means I need to figure out what problems you all are trying to solve, and the problems are often harder than the solutions, so I've been looking at that. The only way I know how to explain that is to tell a story, and so the story I'm going to tell you is a story about my first 6 months at SolarWinds. I learned a strong lesson in the time value of recovery. So I started in July. And 2 weeks in, I just finished all the HR setup. My laptop's ready to go. I'm really excited. I go off to my first offsite meeting, the executive offsite. I get to introduce myself to everybody and kind of get the gears rolling for what I'm going to be doing at the company. On my way back from this trip, TSA, you guys know TSA, Airport Security in the US, and if you haven't, they don't like me very much, I guess. They decided to help me by pushing my laptop off of the sliding bins down into the concrete, totally smashed my laptop. I had not been with the company long enough with my own product. I hadn't installed it yet. Hadn't installed my own product on my own laptop. I had no backup. IT gave me a loaner, and I said, well, that's okay. You know, I'll just keep using the loaner. My laptop's going to get fixed. So here I am over a backup product. My initial emotional reaction to this problem was, I can wait. I'll just wait for them to fix my laptop, send it back. All the data's on there. Yeah, the monitor doesn't work anymore, but I know it's all on there. Lo and behold, the original laptop comes back, and I begin using again. All my files are there. I was like, hurrah, I didn't actually have to do this recovery operation. Strangely enough, hardware failure. right? They sent me back the laptop, it was fixed, but there was still damage from that fall, and one of the other pieces broke. I had luckily thought, with the advice of my team, that I should install backup this time. So yes, I went through the whole install, my laptop completely backed up, all my files are safe, but my laptop does crash again, hardware failure, and I have to ship it off once again to be repaired. IT gives me another loaner laptop, and I'm like, you know what? I can wait. I'm gonna get this laptop back, all my files will be fine, I'll just keep working, right? There's this emotional response, there's this hesitation, if you will. I don't know if you guys experience this. How many of you love to call up and say, hey, can you restore something from backup for me? I mean, I feel ashamed. It's like I wasn't able to fix it. It's my fault. Why would I go ask for IT to like restore my stuff? Like that's so ancient. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna wait. So don't attempt to restore. Continue business as usual. I guess you can maybe think what's happening here. I get a note from Apple RMA. I'm an Apple guy. I use an Apple laptop. We can't get the piece that's broken in your old MacBook, so we're going to send you a new one. Is that okay? The IT guy's like, yeah, we get a new loaner laptop. I'm like, no, my data is no longer on the new nice laptop I get. So I get a new machine, doesn't have my data on it, but guess what? I get to do the restore. The time in between all of this, 4 months altogether, my little last note here on restore attempted with a decryption key. Don't lose that decryption key. It doesn't matter what product you're on, I'm sure there's a decryption key. They may tell you it's important 6 months ago when you install it. It's really important. I did get my data restored. I had a working laptop. But I had to deal with this problem of emotionally not wanting to take advantage of this backup product, right? I back up for a reason. You all back up for a reason. Here's a question. How many of you at home, we can leave our businesses out of it, have a backup product running and installed on your home machine? Okay, cool. How many of it is commercial versus free? You pay for it. Okay, even fewer. How many of those backups you do at home is like the way I back up my wife's computer? Like I copy it to a 1 terabyte external hard drive and say I have a backup. Like it's actually a copy, like a workaround copy. Yeah, you could admit it. It's okay. It's me too. That's what we think about backup. It really is a backup, right? It's not something you plan on using. It's not really ready to go. So let's talk a little bit about that emotional problem, right? And I want to talk about it in relation to the data for protecting. And I mentioned early on, I was used to protecting personal information, credit card information, securing environments for data not getting out. But there's a different type of data out there. My personal data is important. I'm not going to deny that, right? And we all know what the personal data is. GDPR has made us all intimately aware with protecting and keeping track of where this stuff goes. But there's this concept I want to introduce called working data. And this is the data. This picture of this wonderful carpenter kind of making something rings home to me. My dad was a carpenter. And he built stuff with his hands. So his job was to go into his workshop and build something, and someone would buy it. A lot of the people I work with now, myself included, my job is to go into the shop and build stuff with my hands. But that stuff I'm building is what I call working data. These are the presentations, this very presentation, right? This is one of my working artifacts. This is a piece of furniture for me. It's not great. I'm not the best at it, I admit it. But images, a lot of you are in the business of creating marketing content, marketing collateral. You put time and effort into that. Code, configurations, these things that you do, these are your digital artifacts. These are what we're talking about in data protection when you're really looking at the realm of backup and recovery. How many of you have really worried about this type of data for your customers? Some of you. It's weird. You have to think all of your customers are like yourself. You may treat your own, if you don't have backups at home, you may not see the ultimate value of them in the office. The last 3 companies I worked at prior to Solarwinds, I did not have a corporate provided backup tool for my work laptop. They would rather me rebuild a presentation I lost, or they say put it on OneDrive. What happens when OneDrive doesn't get backed up, or OneDrive goes down, or Microsoft is unavailable, or worse yet, the file gets encrypted and then synced over to OneDrive, and then both sides are gone, right? Backups are important. So I want to call up an example here for data protection, a digital photography studio example. I know this is a primarily hosting kind of cloud conference. I'm familiar with this because a family member of mine actually runs a digital photography studio, and I am the IT guy in a sense. And for her, the private data is one thing, but her working data is really the livelihood, the life and blood of what goes on here. You do a client shoot, take your camera out, 30 minutes for a headshot, maybe much longer for a family session. And that's just racking up digital artifacts that you need to take care of. Bring them home, put them on your computer, then you're going to go into the editing process. You're going to put time and love and tweaks into every single one of those files before you make it ready. You're going to take those files, load it up on your website, put it in a share area so people can actually take a look at the artifacts that you're moving around, marketing collateral that you need to push out, website configuration. She hosts her website at a hosting provider, uses a template. She spends a lot of time changing those hexadecimal numbers for colors to try to get everything to look exactly right. That's working data. Like if I lose that data, she's lost time and time and time that she's put into doing that. All of this is on one computer, right? That one computer houses all of this with a few cloud services. And that's a lot of lost capacity if she does that. Her backups right now is, like I said, I make a copy of her computer, but I have since implemented more of an official recovery protocol for her as we go forward. So I want to talk a little bit about a disaster. So the title here was Disaster-Ready Data Protection. And what we're seeing is that disasters are becoming more common, not the ones like the middle picture here with the fires and the explosions, right? Those are kind of statistically held steady. How many of you remember in your career an event, usually you don't talk about these events, where you had an actual disaster and you had to restore from it, when you actually needed your backups? Anyone have these events? Yeah, a couple people willing to admit it. I've had a few. So before I got into software, I actually worked at Morgan Stanley online in their Salt Lake City, Utah office. And I relocated to Manhattan just after 9/11, and I actually executed disaster recovery planning for their network operations team there. That was my first foray into this space. I remember a time when I was at Opsware in the North Carolina office, and we actually had a data center fire. It came in, we had smoke, we had to remove equipment, we had to take care of actually using those backups. All the time in between there, we always had backups, but we never actually needed them. There were a couple times where we had semi-disasters. I call them semi-disasters because we looked at it and we're like, you know what? It's not worth it to restore from backup. It'll take too long. We have the data, but we'll just get through it. And I think that's what makes it not ready. Your backup approach, your backup strategy really needs to be ready for these things. And I think the ransomware and kind of the crypto attacks that we're starting to see are making that even more important. These are targeted attacks that are coming at your data, not necessarily your private data, because they want to see that. These are coming at your working data, that time lost, the loss of operation, the things that are going to take your businesses down. A good portion of small businesses, when they get hit with one of these, they don't come back 6 to 8 months. Sometimes they're business-ending events, and they're coming more. I think the interesting thing about the definition here is the affected community. For a small business, their affected community is them and their specific customers, and we need to make sure we take care of them. So let's talk about that a little bit. Some disasters, natural disasters, flood, lightning, landslides, hazards, fires, and accidents, all of these are real for anyone that's running an office anywhere. The cloud's awesome, but it's basically a computer running somewhere. Right? Anything that's running somewhere has natural elements that can encounter it, so we have to look out for those. Digital disasters, I talked through a couple of those that I experienced myself. A funny note on the digital disasters, so I mentioned I was ready to go last week, and this is where emotionally I'm now ready for these types of events. IT came to me one more time, and I shook my head and I said, uh-oh, this isn't good. They said, we've decided that we're going to implement File Vault on all of our Mac users so that it's disk encrypted. Has anyone ever had File Vault go awry? Well, I had before, so I knew it was coming. But I said, IT, go ahead, install File Vault. I lost all my files, recovered from backup, and I was okay to go. I didn't wait. I just said, look, I have it. I have it there available to me. I'm going to go ahead and use it, and I'm going to be ready for this as it happens. So some key considerations. Offsite locations, maybe not as important for your digital disasters, but for your physical disasters, if your backup is stored alongside your equipment, it's probably in the line of fire from the same disaster. So you want to look at a way to make sure that's out. I am going to age myself here. My first job, I ran the 9-inch tape reel for an AS400 at a major hospital. And I sent those 9-inch tapes off to the mountains into like a cave. I don't know the name of the cave, but we kept them there. So if we wanted to use something off that, it took a long time to get it back, but they were safe there. It was patient data. We knew we could get them back. That was an important thing to do. Now we have cloud locations. You can keep your backup data on hand, but not on site, and I think that's really important. Data to recover, like how are you going to recover the data? Do you need systems available to put the data on, or do you just need the data itself? Sometimes you actually need a full repro, the system from the bare metal all the way up. Sometimes you can just stand it up in a new virtual system as you're waiting for the other things. They call these fail to and fail back events. You want to be able to do both. For my laptop, I would have just failed to the loaner, and then I would have failed back when they got it back. That would have been a great approach for me to be, rather than being hesitant to actually tap in and use that backup technology that I bought as an insurance policy to say my data's safe. But if you never use it, that's all it is an insurance policy. You want to be ready to use that. And I started to uncover my hesitance was really around this concept of the time to recover. The first time it was like, I can just wait. There's no urgency for me to get this data back. I'm not going to bother the backup team to bring this to the top of their list and have me take the data back. I got time. Time to recover. There's this element of I feel good that I have it, but I didn't take advantage of the fact that I had it. And that's where we want to get to with disaster-ready data protection. So more on the time value recovery, and these are some of the working data risks that I wanted to kind of put in your mind about why data protection is becoming more important. This happened to me in the course of that story I told, the narrative about me losing data, me getting my laptop going through those situations. How would you do in a presentation if you lost it minutes before the meeting? You may have a backup of it, but if it was just before the meeting, not being able to get it right then, you may reschedule the meeting, you may not get the meeting again, you may wing it with no presentation. But there's risks there in that data loss. How many have spent more than 1, 2, 3, 4 hours on a single spreadsheet and forgot to put it in your OneDrive? Maybe you're on the airplane, no internet access. I'll just do a local copy. You get back and you go to copy it to your office computer or send it somewhere. It gets like corrupted over email and it's gone. That's time you don't get back. Right? There's my pet peeve has been in my presentations where you're drawing like a smart art graphic, a really pretty diagram, and you moved this one shape, just one shape, like 87 times, but now you got it in the exact right spot, exact right size, the right shading, everything you like, and that's gone. Guess what? I can recreate that presentation really quickly, but I'm never going to get that shape back to where I had it before, and that's a lot of pain. In the case of the client photo shoot examples, if those digital files go away, that's irreplaceable. It's a little bit like the MasterCard commercial, right? You're not getting another shoot with that client. They're probably going to go somewhere else, a different photographer. We talk about recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives. These are kind of industry things we've come up with. All of the tools out there have them. You can kind of set your policies, figure it out in test, make sure they work. You need to talk about retention. How long do you want to keep this data? How far back in time do you need to go? But what I've found out is, how often do you actually recover from it? Have you never recovered from your backup? Have you never actually tried to see if what you get out of it is what you have? Or do you really need to shift to a just-in-time recovery? I can use this. I can lose my files. I can go get a new laptop at the Apple Store tomorrow and just start using where I left off. I think we want to tip towards the just-in-time recovery and get away from this never. We want to be ready for these things as they happen. So what does that mean for me, switching from a recovery plan to a disaster-ready state? This is some of the facts kind of behind this. 60% of the small businesses are going to be hit with issues costing them between $84,000 and $148,000, and 60% of the companies go out of business within 6 months after an attack. A lot of you leverage small businesses as kind of core tenets of your business, so this should be something that makes you really think about the need for this disaster-ready data protection in your environments. The things you need to ask in a disaster recovery plan, and I'm sure everyone has a disaster recovery plan, that's kind of been talked about for 20 years, is to have a DR plan. What happens is when the plan goes into action, and you need to know what data you're going to protect, you need to know what systems you're going to protect. Sometimes not all systems are protected equally. You'll go back up your core servers, you'll go make sure the core things for your business are up and running. But what about your working data, your population of users, and all of that time and effort they put into these artifacts that support your digital businesses day in and day out? Is that protected? Can you get that back? Is that on the important list now? If you're really disaster ready, that's how you stay ready to go. How fresh does it need to be? And where do you store the data in the systems? So if you need to restore all of your servers and you don't have servers to restore to, or you're waiting for a hardware order to arrive before you can stand this back up and run it again, do you have cloud infrastructure set aside, ready to restore to? Have you tested that restore? Have you tested that you can meet those RTO objectives in terms of these restore operations? And then, is it secure in a physical disaster? And I mentioned this with the note on if your backups are nearby or not offsite, at least in a different location. You want to make sure your backups themselves are secure. Get back to those being protected. And finally, you want to test your failover. Do you actually know how long it takes for you to recover? I think technically you can say you're going to be able to get your files back, but do you know how long? You may have an objective, but do you know the actual time it's going to take you to get this stuff back up and running? And then when you do, how do you return to normal operation? Have you gone through the failback procedure? Sometimes when you start up a failover environment and you start running there, failing back is harder, and you just kind of cut and run and stay on the failover gear. So make sure you test both to and from on these operations. And that's what Solarwinds does, and I know Solarwinds does a lot of things. So we have a booth. Come check out the booth, talk about a lot of things we do. We do backup quite well. So we're a cloud-first data protection service for all of the things here. I'm not going to read the marketing slick for you, but come check us out. We can demo there, ask you there. I'll be around, so if you want to talk to me about unique use cases for your customers and how you might be able to extend protection to their use cases, I'd love to entertain those while I'm here. And otherwise, thank you, and glad to be here.